Hello, welcome to Graphic Policy Radio, the podcast that mixes politics and geekdom. And we are joined today by a guest I'll introduce in one moment, and we'll be discussing The Defenders, Marvel's latest Netflix show. Defenders was supposed to be Marvel and Netflix's biggest hit yet, a team-up series bringing together Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist, and their surrounding cast of supporting characters. The results have been divisive. Some fans hate it, some found it really fun. And we've been kind of waiting to do it on the show to make sure that our viewers have had time to watch the series. I believe this will be pretty spoiler-filled, although I myself have actually not completed the series. And I'm joined today with my special guest, Brandon David Wilson, a Los Angeles-based filmmaker and educator. He's directed numerous short films and 2 feature films, most recently Sepulveda, which you can watch at sepulvedathemovie.com. And you can also follow him on thegeniusbastard.com, tweets at geniusbastard, and recently wrote a really great piece for us about The Defenders. Welcome to the show again.
Thanks for having me, Alana.
Absolutely. You were last with us to talk about Spider-Man Homecoming, which was a movie that we had you and I were both really keen on. And it seems like we're both not the biggest fans of The Defenders, but I wanted to sort of start by asking a question of what was your original relationship to the material, both to the comics and also to the first three series, Jessica Jones, Daredevil, and Iron Fist, because our listeners can definitely, if you guys want to know my thoughts about Jessica Jones, I did a whole series of podcasts about it, one episode of the podcast for each episode of the show. So I've said plenty about that. I was also a really big fan of season 1 of Daredevil, not as much of a fan of season 2 of Daredevil, and I did not watch Iron Fist. So that's the Ilana short version of the lead-up series. What did you come into this expecting or want based on the prior series?
Well, there was a lot of opportunity to, and let me just say, I'm going to try not to just completely repeat what I said in the essay. I sort of looked it over a couple of hours ago just to sort of see what I could build on rather than just sort of say again. But, I was really hoping to see something kind of, obviously different, something unique. The idea of doing something that was epic and yet at the same time sort of street level was very intriguing. There was a lot of opportunity, I think, for them to sort of really do something interesting that sort of drew on all the characters' mythologies and psychologies. And I was pretty disappointed. I've watched everything as it's come out. I've watched every show, every Marvel Netflix show, sort of like within a week of them dropping. I can't really binge within 24 hours. I have kids, but Defenders actually I watched within probably 24 hours just because I happened to be off work at the time and I was able to. But so I was really hoping for that. Now the Defenders themselves, I don't have a real huge connection to the comics or the comics line. The only Defenders comics that I own are the ones that Matt Fraction did a few years ago with the team was Doctor Strange and Iron Fist and Red She-Hulk, and that sort of short run they did. That's really it. I know of them, I know the history, but I really didn't have a huge the Defenders has to do this, it has to do that. And of course the big problem, as I talked about in the essay, is that there's really no connection whatsoever to the Defenders comic, to the Defenders iconography or mythology or kind of characters that are associated with the Defenders, and it really is just this sort of in name only Defenders. Now, of course, we knew it wasn't going to be the comic book Defenders because of the absence of Doctor Strange due to the sort of corporate issues with him that he wasn't going to be participating in this, which is how, if you know the Defenders, it really is essentially Doctor Strange's backup group. So that was already going to be different. However, it really there was just nothing of very little attempt to sort of do in the show what the Defenders did in the comics, and it really just it was just so disappointing. I mean, the Iron Fist was bad. The other shows I think really worked very well. I think Jessica Jones is in the top 5 or 6 if you rank the Marvel show, the Netflix shows with the Marvel MCU films, I think Jessica Jones ranks among the top 5 or 6 things that Marvel's done, period, since Iron Man. And I'm a huge Daredevil fan. He definitely is a really great, important character, and I collected him and Power Man and Iron Fist back in the 80s. So, yeah, these are characters that I know and really sort of came to this hoping that it would kind of click, and it did not at all.
Yeah, I had noped out of the Iron Fist show because it looked really bad. I'm not just speaking from the perspective of being someone who wanted it to be an Asian American character, right. And as Iron Fist, it looked bad even just on the merits of Finn Jones's performance and the plot lines and the characterization. I don't think that watching it, I don't think that like it was necessary to watch Iron Fist to watch Defenders, because I think maybe if somebody has zero familiarity with traditional comics tropes in these corners of the superhero universe, they might be a little bit lost by some of the tropes that get brought in for this team-up series. But if you're vaguely familiar with the comics world, I think you can totally jump into watching Defenders without watching Iron Fist at all.
Absolutely. Iron Fist, frankly, it's just a waste. There really did not need to be, we did not need a series for Iron Fist because so little was done, revealed, accomplished. We really would have been so much better to save that chunk of money and put it with a Defenders chunk of money, so that and maybe add an episode or two. And listen, we didn't get a Hawkeye film when, before the Avengers. He just kind of was, he appeared here in Thor, and then we picked him up, there. I mean, that's, you can't do necessarily. I don't know why we had to have a solo show for every character. I think it would have been great to have Iron Fist be our way into the Defenders, introduce him, over the first couple of episodes, and then there's nothing in that show that really was necessary that couldn't have been conveyed, in about a couple of half-hour chunks in over 2 episodes. So yeah, it was not necessary at all. And and also the Defenders plot line is so generic that there's just hardly any reason to. No, there's really not much you need to know. There are these sort of generic bad guys that want to do a bad thing, and that's really it. I mean, of course there's some history. You should know, I guess that when Matt lies to the rest of the team about Elektra, but I mean, that's really not much of a. There's just not much to that, because it's. I mean, it doesn't give you a lot that I know he's lying. He has a relationship with her. It comes out later. No, there's not much that you need to know really about any of these. In fact, you probably enjoy Defenders a lot more if you didn't watch the earlier shows, because you would know that how far it's fallen from. In terms of quality, and you might be able to enjoy it a little more on its own terms if you didn't know how good the other shows were. So, and I'm really trying. There's 2 things I don't want to do. I don't want to just spend the next, however long saying it sucks over and over again. I'm going to try to find different ways to sort of express that. And I also really don't want to get into what I would have done. I mean, there's one character I might bring up that I think was a huge mistake to not bring in, but, I don't want to start pitching ideas for, the Defenders miniseries there should be. But, yeah, I mean, it's just too bad. The elements were there, to make a good show. And this is now what? This is the second of 3 strikes for Marvel Television, the first being Iron Fist. You can argue about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but we'll put it aside for now, whether or not that's a strike too as well. Agent Carter, of course, had a great first season, and the second one not so much. But setting all those aside, I think Iron Fist is absolutely kind of a strike, even though, you will find people on Twitter or, on fan comment sections who think all these shows are good. I mean, there's a section of geekdom that just, hey, if they see the logo of their favorite comic book company, they're in. That's it. That's all they need. They see the logo, they see the character, that's it. They're not very discriminating. So there are people who like all these shows, but clearly that's not this. They've fallen short of the others. And just real quick, so Iron Fist strike one, Defender strike two, and since I published the my essay about the Defenders in Graphic Policy, we've had the Inhumans debacle. So
good
this
point.
is, this is, which everyone saw coming. My joke has always been that the the Inhumans was the Trump care of the MCU, that, nobody wants it, but it's coming.
Oh my God.
Whether we want it or not, it's coming. And yeah, it's been a fiasco. So they went to the trouble of, a lot of people worked hard, went to the trouble of putting it on IMAX for very little result. I mean, they basically have yanked it from the IMAX screens now to make room for it, which people do want to see. So yeah, this is a colossal disaster for Marvel Television, which really put a lot at stake for this. And if you watch the behind the scenes things, it was originally part of the MCU, the film lineup, and there's a lot of sort of scuttlebutt that Kevin Feige never wanted the Inhumans. This was from Ike Perlmutter. This was his idea that they were going to be the X-Men for the MCU, and that it was completely, nobody was excited about it. And when they parted company, when Marvel Studios and Marvel Television parted company, that Perlmutter decided to press ahead anyway and brought in IMAX. And so anyway, there seems to be a big problem in Marvel Television with these shows that are just not landing. So,
wow, I'm just happy to share that one more time with our people, because I think that's like the greatest thing anyone has said. The Inhumans is the Trump care of the MCU. Nobody wants it, but it keeps coming.
Right.
I'm just like that. Put that on the bumper sticker. That's like the most Graphic Policy Radio take one could possibly have on the matter also. So there's that.
Thank you.
Yes. So anyhow, I think like for me, I began the series with hopes that it could be good in spite of itself, because you have, 3 good leads in it, and that was something to work from. And fans just really love the whole team up dynamic. Fans want a team up. Team ups is like what the superhero universes are built of. It's our thing. And I thought that, I really wanted it to be good. But even after the first episode, I was really clear to me that it was not going to live up to the potential that I saw from the other series. One of the things that's particularly pronounced in the earliest episodes before the real team up has happened is that you can really see each individual writing staff from each individual show. I've been trying to check to see if this is accurate, but it really looks to me that Jessica Jones' solo scenes were written by folks from Jessica Jones' team, that Luke Cage's solo scenes are written by folks from the Luke Cage writing staff, Iron Fist were written by Iron Fist, etc. I don't know if you've been able to figure out if that's the case, but they certainly seem to be from how the dialogue is done and how they're written in general. And
from what I've read is that there was an attempt by, I'm not sure if they actually wrote it, but they definitely, Marco Ramirez, who's the showrunner of Defenders, we need to establish that, he reached out to the other 3. Now, let's also note that Marco Ramirez was the showrunner on Daredevil Season 2. So along with, I believe it's Douglas Petrie. The 2 of them replaced Stephen DeKnight, who left Daredevil Season 1, who, of course, he himself was replacing Drew Goddard, who started Daredevil, but quickly left to do the Sinister Six, which, of course, now will never happen. But so Marco Ramirez and Petrie they didn't have to consult anyone for Daredevil. So at the very least, there was consultation, if not writing, to try to get the voices that have been established in the individual shows. But so that's what I've heard.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that the most moving thing that happened in the whole series was in episode 1 or 2, one of the Luke Cage scenes where when he goes up to talk with the mother, who's one of her sons was killed before the show begins, and her other son is just been gone to jail, and Luke is meeting with her to talk about him and how to help him, with his arrest and what, to track down who's been exploiting the young folks. That whole scene between him and the mom is really great. And then when the mom gets a phone call from the prison saying that her son has died, and she turns around and says to Luke, all my babies are dead, I just fucking bawled. I cried like real ugly tears. And it's the sort of thing where if I think about it even now, I would probably start crying again because I thought it was that moving. It was that well acted by the characters in it. The writing was that good. It was just that well done. That whole scene was like just remarkably good. I don't think I've cried at anything from anything that happened in any MCU product. Oh no, I forgot actually. In fact, you and I were talking about how I got a little bit misty-eyed during Guardians of the Galaxy Part 2 because I was manipulated by their mind warping. But so take it back. This is the second time, but that was a different kind of cry. This was like a seriously sad, moved kind of cry that was happening here. So I'll give the Defenders that. That scene fucking wrecked me.
Right. And let's give a shout out to Debbie Morgan, the actress who played the woman that Coulter, as Luke Cage, is talking to in that scene. She's been around for quite a while. Soap operas back in the '80s. I remember seeing her. So yeah, she's a veteran actor, and she definitely brought it. And I didn't have quite the experience because I was already starting to get annoyed with the show. But she's definitely, I think, brought a lot to that. And I wish there was, she's one of those people you wish that you saw more of, and had bigger parts. But she definitely was well used in that scene.
And from there though, like once the series really begins to move towards the whole team up thing, I felt like the show kept assuming that the audience would disbelieve the possibility of a team up. Now, in the real world, I think one could be skeptical about it, but people know the form of the superhero team up. It's not just something which has gone beyond superhero genre shows at this point. It's something which, Buffy and any sort of action show that's a team show has these moments. And the whole show felt like it was just lampshading. Are we going to team up now? We might team up in a way that was such a waste of time because we know you're all going to team up. It's the Defenders. Like, why are you lampshading this? I believe that you all will team up. Please stop posturing about it.
Yeah,
and that's when I start to get bored.
When Jessica leaves the restaurant in the fourth episode, I believe it is, after their first big brawl in the corridor of the Midland Circle Financial, and they take refuge in this restaurant. And let's point out, almost the entire episode takes place in this Chinese restaurant, which leads me to believe that the budget was a big problem on this project. And she leaves, and this isn't me. It's like, it's just, come on. I mean, I know she's Jessica. I know she's got to be the eye rolling. I'm too cool for this shit. I know that, but it just, it is a bit of a stretch to have her walk away when she's coming right back. And then, she goes to someone's house and sees her learn something, and she's right back within an hour or so. It's really flimsy, really not, that's just not, I get what they're trying to do, that's not how it would work. That was definitely a problem. Go.
So we the viewers know this format, and we're not going to question its validity. So just make the team up happen. Like, I thought that the coincidences that brought them all together in the office building actually did work. I completely believed they were all in that office building for all of these combining factors. I was like, yes, you have sold me on this. And that was a steep order. So once that's done, you guys don't have to go to far-fetched levels to make me believe that a team-up's going to happen. Just drop it. Let it happen. I will say, like, after that episode, I think it might have been I think it was around episode 4 that I realized I began feeling like watching it was a chore. And I contacted you, and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to try to make myself get through this whole darn series before doing the podcast because I've got Twin Peaks to finish, and that's like great art. And I'm going to go watch my Twin Peaks. That's great art. And then BoJack was on.
Literally
that
is literally the antithesis of everything the Defenders is. Yes, Twin Peaks is absolutely the cinematic achievement of the year, and Right. I've watched it twice already, and
wow.
Defenders. I literally haven't thought about the Defenders aside from a few random tweets about something that didn't work. Like, yeah, it's completely gone from my mind. So yeah, you made the right call.
I mean, so here I am. I'm about halfway through episode 6, and I will say that at the very end of the episode 5, and we're about to welcome to spoiler land, my children. From here on in, there be dragons. Now that I think you've gotten enough. I think our basic listeners have gotten enough information to have a sense about whether or not they want to watch this show or not. You know, I think you can draw from this enough about whether or not we think it's worth watching. You know, I definitely think in a world where there's also Twin Peaks, like, no, you don't need to. But I don't think it's terrible. Like, I don't think it's a terrible show. I don't think it's utter shit. I just don't think it's that good. That would sort of be my, and I think it's a disappointment compared to their other series. That would be my hot take on it.
Yeah.
And
I really think this might be one of the worst things that has happened to the Marvel Universe, cinematic universe. I would say, you know, and I rank these things kind of meticulously and waste a lot of time on it. I would say the only things worse than this, and I'm not counting Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Agent Carter, but the only thing worse than this would be Iron Fist Season 1 and Thor: The Dark World, and that's debatable. I think it's really at the bottom of this output.
Wow.
And yeah, I actively dislike it. And it's a shame because, again, I wanted to like it, and I'm certainly a huge fan. As anyone who follows me knows, I'm a huge comic book fan, and I was a huge fan of, again, first season of Daredevil, Luke Cage first season, and also Jessica Jones really is that's really the gold standard for I think what these shows can accomplish. Jessica Jones really has done a huge amount for this genre. I've read that Netflix can track who there's sort of three blocks of people who come to Defenders. People like me who just watch the stuff, who watch all the stuff. Then there's the people who came to it through Jessica Jones, who are most likely to have watched it, also watched Daredevil after the fact. And also then there's the Luke Cage people who are most likely to have watched Iron Fist. And so you have these two groups kind of coming together for the Defenders. And so I've read that.
That makes sense.
So yeah, it's a big disappointment.
Because I had, for example, I definitely had lots of friends from feminist movement work who watched Jessica Jones because of what it was and had no familiarity with the character or with Marvel at all. Yeah. And then who, after liking Jessica Jones, were like, I guess I might as well go back and watch Daredevil. And then I know that there are people who didn't watch Jessica Jones or Daredevil, but because of the Luke Cage premise and knowing who was the showrunner on it and their affection for hip hop, were like, okay, I'm going to watch this. And then after that, went back and watched the others. So that is a very true. Whereas I don't think Iron Fist didn't bring in any new people. Like if you were watching Iron Fist, it's because you were a Marvel stan. That's it.
Absolutely, yeah. That's true. Right. I mean, Luke Cage. Let us remember, Luke Cage broke Netflix. The weekend that Luke Cage dropped, Netflix crashed, and they've issued these sort of weird statements about Iron Fist having these huge ratings. And again, we don't know this because Netflix does not release any numbers whatsoever. They don't want to, they don't have to. So what we know is what they tell us. So there has been a lot of talk about how these shows, the Iron Fist did well, but I know one thing: Iron Fist did not break Netflix. Luke Cage broke Netflix, and no other show did that, and the Defenders certainly didn't. So I mean, there's definitely these are and that's the other shame of this not working is that they're all with the exception of Iron Fist, they're all pretty beloved characters. These characters mean a lot to people. Jessica Jones, even though she's a new character, has really kind of staked out her place, and she definitely has done a lot for the genre. And so it's really a shame that that it didn't add up. To something worthy of what they did individually. And I should just take a moment to say that at this moment I'm wearing, somewhat coincidentally, my Defenders T-shirt, which I got from We Love Fine. There's a designer there named Rosilla74 who does these sort of minimalist T-shirts style of T-shirts, and he did one of the Defenders, and they're all in their classic sort of costumes, Jessica Jones in her jewel and so forth costume, and Luke Cage in the yellow shirt, so the yellow disco shirt. So it's funny that as I'm saying how this is one of the worst things they've done, but I'm wearing the T-shirt, because I love the characters. So anyway, but yeah, I would be a little more harsh than you even about how, maybe because I've seen the whole thing, but just how poor it is.
Well, this is what I was going to say though, is I was totally ready to just be like, I'm not going to watch the rest of this, but after I went to watch the episode 5, I started like the episode where that ends with them knocking out Danny. And from here on out, guys, expect complete spoilers. So have at it. The episode where it ends with them knocking out Danny, I suddenly was like, I am kind of interested in what's going to happen.
Knocking out Danny is a great way to start. That's
knocking out Danny is a high point. Yes, for everyone, a high point of the show. But like the shots of Elektra passed out in Daredevil's bed was just a really beautiful shot. The chemistry between Alexandra and Black Sky is like really creepy and good in ways that will definitely please certain corners of the internet. It's not a show that I'm going to prioritize watching over things that I had to see in real time because they were so much more important and artistically valid. But I think I will finish watching it. Maybe after I finish with BoJack Horseman season 3. I think I will finish watching the series. I think that I will, because there's enough open questions that I have sort of around it, and I don't know. Like, it's not great, but it's not terrible. And it's short, thankfully, which I had not even realized when I first began. And I think that
that's really interesting.
The other seasons were kind of long, even. Like, the other series were long. So maybe this is a sign they learned something from that, perhaps?
It is very odd. You would think this would be the long show, right? You've got all these characters. You've got all 4 of them. You've got their sidekicks and supporting characters. And this is a short show, which is kind of counterintuitive because you think this would be the one that was 13 episodes. Whereas, yes, the solo shows, 8 would be great to keep those nice, nice and tight. Punisher's going to be 13 episodes, even though there probably is no reason. And I shouldn't even bring that up because I know how you feel. But about Punisher. There's no reason. 8 is a great length, and yet this show felt so thin. It just like you've got all these characters, and there's really not much plot. There's a lot of the Hand sort of talking about alluding to their long history together and what's going to happen. Are you sure about this? And it just people talking about what they're going to do. The episodes are short. I mean, there's one that's like almost 45 minutes. It just is like so surprisingly thin. I mean, I think all the Marvel series should be 8 episodes. I feel like the Defenders could have been two feature-length films released a month apart, and it would have been just fine. And there was no reason to make this 8 hours. I think 4, you could have done the same job in 4. But, and I wonder, for me, I'm just wondering how much of this was money. I just know that the purse strings, I don't think, Netflix obviously is spending a king's ransom right now on all their shows. But I think, Marvel Television seems to be kind of tight with the purse strings. This show does not feel like it feels like they didn't really save up extra for the Defenders. In fact, it felt like this show felt a little bit cheaper than I'd say the other Marvel shows. It felt some of the special effects are really at the level of are below Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Some of the just the green screen and things was pretty poor, and obviously they didn't have a lot of money. Now, of course, I'm an independent filmmaker, so I know if you don't have a lot of money, that doesn't mean it's got to look like that. You figure out ways to cheat and to make it look like you have more than you do, and which they didn't do. So you have the poor special effects. You have episodes that are largely set in one location, like the Chinese restaurant where they just they stay for apparently 8 hours. They spend in this Chinese restaurant until they have a fight that destroys the place.
That doesn't bother me at all. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally.
To me, I just wish there was a little more. There was a little more. It was a little less obvious that they were on a budget and a little more action. And I could have done. Again, you think of the money they spent on Iron Fist, which really would have been better served to just add that in with the Defenders budget and really have a ability to do something a little bigger.
No, it's true because, I am someone who really, as a New Yorker, really obsessively watches the shows and points at different locations. Like, ooh, that's the corner of this and that. Oh, that's my friend's apartment building. Like all that, I'm all into that. And there was lots less of it here because you had lots of things shot in the Chinese restaurant. But
Right.
in other situations, I don't really mind capsules, stuff like that. And it didn't really didn't bother me in and of itself. I do want to note that the whole, there's a giant neon sign above the Chinese restaurant thing is very uncommon in New York. It's not unheard of in Manhattan. There are a few Chinese restaurants in Manhattan that have neon signage above their restaurant. But those are the most historic places in Chinatown. Those are not your average place in Chinatown. And I feel really bad because that building that they wrecked is probably landmarked. If it's one of those few buildings, that's a landmarked building, guys. Please be careful. Speaking of things that cost money, though, let's talk about Sigourney Weaver, which I'm sure cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
I was really happy to see her in that because I'm always happy to see, older women get roles that are exciting and dynamic. I did not know who or what she'd be cast as in this. It made a lot of sense to have her be one of the elder folks of the hand because then she can be a big, terrifying yet serene boss lady, which is what she did. I think she was really good, and I think that the character, the way she was introduced with her being sick and the reveal and her fixation on the finer things in life and Epicureanness, that all really worked for me. I thought her acting really worked for me, and what I thought was best was her in the fight scene. I mean, it's obvious that, the fight scene that I saw, there might be more later on that might be terrible, I don't know. But in the one I saw, where she's tangling just a little bit with Black Sky to demonstrate that she is someone who has physical capabilities herself, yes, it's obviously when they cut away and you have a stunt double doing the martial arts work for her. And I'm fine with that, but it was subtly done cut. And then when they get in close again and she's still restraining her, I really enjoyed seeing Sigourney Weaver herself sort of holding back a young person who's fighting to get free and using her body in that physical dominant way when it was in fact her, the actress, doing it, right? And I thought that was great. That made me happy.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that we're not just both going, that was terrible. So I'm gonna definitely be doing that. I'm glad you have a more nuance, a little more variation in your response, because it makes for a more interesting conversation. I love Sigourney Weaver, of course. As you know, and if you follow my tweets, one of my big sort of soapboxes is I'm constantly sort of tweeting about the need to get more women over 50 into the MCU. That's just something I think is really important. They're missing a lot. There's a lot of great talent out there that could be really interesting. My number one is I want this will never happen, but Frances McDormand as J. Jonah Jameson. That's my number one fantasy casting for a woman over 50 in these films. So
totally.
I'm so glad to see Sigourney Weaver, and yet, and here comes the but, and yet, it just didn't pay off for me. I mean, it was all set up, and I mean, and of course, I've seen them all, and it just didn't go anywhere. It was like they sort of used her to cover up the weakness that how thin the character was. Also, I really don't understand why they didn't make this an established villain. This is, I think as I said in my essay, one of the rules that we've kind of figured out about what makes comic book movies work is you really try not to make up bad guys, especially bad guys. I think you can make up maybe a supporting character in there, but for the most part, I think the characters really need to come from the comic. And I'm not one to judge a film by its slavish fidelity to the source material. But I just think that we've seen these movies play really well when they play on the fact that the history of the character, and you may not hear it all, but that this supporting character is this person and who this person is. To bring in just to sort of fabricate this, Highlander kind of figure that and for the villain, it just, to me, I mean, why not make it, Morgana Le Fay or Morgan Le Fay,
right.
Who's a very famous sort of mystical villain to Spider-Woman and so forth. Make it someone that is already in that realm. You literally have this treasure trove of characters. You can't find one and just shape it enough to, really give it some resonance. And so, she ends up being kind of a red herring and just really not paying off. So, and of course, she delivers some moments because she's a fabulous actress, but it just really, you know, I'm in the end, it just felt like stunt casting, like, let's get Sigourney Weaver because that will make people go nuts, and you know she's great, and you'll be thinking about that. But it just it wasn't satisfying for me in the end.
So I'm of two minds of this. On the one hand, who she is in relation to the Hand is entirely consistent with how the Hand is constructed. Like there are elders of the Hand. Periodically, series will introduce new random elders of the Hand from out of nowhere. Daredevil, the one where they bring back Elektra from the dead, which was like a huge inspiration for this one. But again, like they have random new members of the Hand with ancient history show up. So like there being yet another elder of the Hand who we don't already know showing up in this doesn't really bother me because they all kind of are like that. But on the other hand, I got to give full credit to the Black Girl Nerds podcast for pointing this out. There's no reason that everything that she did couldn't have been Madame Gao. Madame Gao could have just been Alexandra.
Absolutely, 100%. And
they
Madame Gao
undermined her. They absolutely undermined Madame Gao in the show in ways that I immediately noticed and rubbed me the wrong way. I don't like her being positioned to be subservient. That was bad. But I didn't realize that actually this could just be Madame Gao instead of Alexandra doing literally everything that Alexandra did. And now I'm really
that's a great
sad.
Point.
Right?
Yeah.
So shout out to them for
making
me see that.
Right, and that's an excellent observation, and it gets back to this niggling problem, which is the Marvel's Asian problem, if you will. This affects Marvel Studios and Marvel Television. That they are quick to borrow the sort of cliches and the martial arts and this, but then when it comes to actually having people of that culture, Iron Fist. I mean, as Stan Lee's favorite, used to say, "Enough said." There's nothing. I don't need to go into why Iron Fist is a problem. We know that, but yeah, you could have corrected a lot of that. You go into that problem again with the Hand, where you have this sort of Yellow Peril conspiracy thing coming back full circle, and at the very least, let Madame Gao, run the thing, and give her some dimension and let this pay off. The woman has been there from the very beginning, right? And so she's just made subservient, and she gets to force push a few things, but it's just it is a shame that they didn't have faith that in her to be the big bad. I mean, and I don't know if it is insecure. They were insecure about maybe having an Asian woman be the heavy, but I really believe that people want positive portrayals, but if you get right a kick-ass villain, I think that steers clear of stereotype. I think people are pretty happy with that too, if it's really well done. If and Marvel's great at creating villains that you are sympathetic to, that you kind of almost want to win. Marvel, both Netflix and the movies, they do that pretty well. So it's just too bad they couldn't pull that off, here.
Yeah, and the actress Wai Ching Ho is just amazing. She needs to be in all the movies. I mean, that performance is just fabulous. And I don't think that the other folks from the Hand were anywhere near as interesting as her.
No, not at all. And of course, my whole time I'm thinking, can the Kingpin just get out of prison and decide he's going to take the Hand and join it to what's left of Hydra? I mean, you have a fabulous villain like D'Onofrio, and I think D'Onofrio's Kingpin is up there among the best of them. Marvel gets they get a lot of shit for their villains, but I think they have had at least 5 great ones, and I think he's up there. And I wanted a villain that I had a little more connection to from the other. A fresh, brand new villain just did not feel right, and Madame Gao could have done that too. I need a villain that's been there throughout, so that this whole thing feels like a climax. Originally there was no plan to do second seasons of the solo shows, but I think the success of Daredevil was so huge, and then Jessica Jones. I mean, very successful, wins a Peabody Award, for Christ's sake. And then Luke Cage, so now they are, of course, they're doing their second seasons. But yeah, originally this was going to be it at first. There's these 4 series leading up to the 5th miniseries, and it'll be interesting to see. There's as far as I know, there's still no commitment about whether the Defenders is a one shot or if it's going to happen again. We don't know, so we'll have to see. And right now as we speak, Jessica Jones and Luke Cage are shooting their second seasons as we record this.
Yeah. I one other thing that I just think we need to talk about that really shows the weakness of the series is, what the hell is the Hand's plan? One of the things that made Vincent D'Onofrio a great villain is that he was Michael Bloomberg. And I really am interested in shows that people get to defeat Michael Bloomberg. Former mayor of New York / megalomaniacal rich man who wants everything to go his way. The Hand's agenda is just so broad. And in this particular political climate, in the beginning of the series when, Luke is asking Danny, well, what does the Hand want? What is their goal? And Luke is coming from a show where Mariah, City Councilwoman Mariah's agenda was very clear. She was going to make herself rich, and she had resentment from her shitty childhood situation, and her plan was gentrification. Right. And it was but of a certain kind where she was able to control people and keep them in their place. And then Danny's they just want to be bad. It's that's just so empty. Just give it. Right. You don't even have to develop it that heavily. Just give them something that's a real concrete motivation. I will say, though, that when they brought back the giant hole in the ground, I was oh, I forgot about the giant hole in the ground. It wasn't just Daredevil who forgot about the giant hole in the ground. It was also me who forgot about the giant hole in the ground. Right. But just generally, saying, oh, these are the folks who made Pompeii happen, that's kind of a cool illusion. But, what is the agenda really about? This is this global conspiracy. What is their alignment? What is their orientation? Just give me something.
It's, again, to quote my own essay, it's kind of shocking that they've had literally 3 years to figure this out. They've had 3 years. They announced this in 2014, the beginning of 2014, that they were going to do this. And it's just clear they never really had a conversation or an idea about the Defenders, that they just figured it would take care of itself. They assigned it not to someone who was going to be able to work on it for a long time. They assigned it to the showrunners of Daredevil Season 2, who presumably are also working at the same time on Daredevil Season 3. Mm-hmm. So it just really stuns me that they how just half-assed and slipshod the whole thing is. You've got the Hand. Okay, well, the Hand is, what do they want? And it's just world domination. Okay, what does that mean and why? And what is the hole in the ground? And when they're bringing, when you find out what's down there, what's under the building. Even that is so poorly explained. Okay, so there's the remnants of something. And what does that mean? What does that do? I really don't know. And I'm a pretty good. I like to think I'm a pretty attentive viewer. I really don't know what the thing down under the building was doing. I just know it was bad, and it was But it's I know that Alexandra is dying, even though she's immortal. But it's just. It just plays on too many, okay, you've seen this kind of thing before. You know what it is. It's okay, but no, what is this? Ghostbusters did a better job of explaining what the villains wanted and what had to happen for them to get what they wanted. And it almost feels like that same kind of thing. This thing has to hit here. We need this key for this lock, and we can open up. But it's and again, they're so coy. You hear Jeff Loeb say, look, the Defenders can't have a hole open up in the sky and the Chitauri come out. They've got to, okay, so you put the hole under the ground, under a building, and it's just the same thing. It's slightly different. So the Hand, again, there's just such missed opportunities. And, Marvel has such great these sort of evil corporate entities.
Yes, they do.
Another soapbox. Where's Roxxon? I think it's political cowardice. I think they're scared to touch Roxxon. For those who are listening and aren't familiar, Roxxon goes back to the mid '70s in Marvel. It's an oil company that is also like a front for an evil Hydra sort of organization, and they've been mentioned a few times on different shows. I think Agent Carter season 2 mentioned them a lot, but my sense is there's a political committee to have this evil company that is also oil, which is huge in the comic books. But Marvel has some great interviews. Right, exactly.
I mean,
so there. There's just some. I mean, look, I get it. I know how it is to work where you don't have a $200 million budget, but when you've got a treasure trove of characters, and again, I know they don't have access to all the characters because I know Kevin Feige has his list that they can't touch, and and that's of course another source of misery for us comic book fans, just knowing that these characters once they're on these Netflix shows, you're never going to see them have their team up on with them, the big screen characters, and it's really a shame, and Daredevil especially. I mean, it's such a shame that this isn't going to happen. Hell, I mean, I'd even like to see Daredevil and Black Widow, have their whatever, when they meet each other, or Daredevil and Cap, just there's so many interesting teams, pairings that would go. The one that I really think would be fabulous is Doctor Strange and Jessica Jones. I think that could be great. I think those two as a team could just be like magic, No pun intended.
No, I like it. Think about it.
Yeah. The detective who sort of was the cynical detective and the mystic, and I think those two would be great together. But you just because there's just there's so little contact now between the MCU and the TV series. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But what's so surprising about Defenders is my last point before I be quiet, is that they're not even really doing what they can with what's on their side of the net. In other words, like for instance, S.H.I.E.L.D., what's happened to S.H.I.E.L.D.? I mean, the movies, for whatever reason, have decided they're going to ignore S.H.I.E.L.D. from now on, which is a problem. But the TV series, the Netflix and ABC series, well, that S.H.I.E.L.D's huge still. Where's S.H.I.E.L.D. here? S.H.I.E.L.D. should be a part of this. I don't know, it would be great if we could get Agent May or Daisy Johnson into the Defenders, but at least have some sort of presence, especially given the fact that technically it's illegal to be a superhero without authorization now. And you got Luke Cage, running around as Luke Cage, doing feats of superheroism without anybody saying, oh, you're not supposed to do that. So it's really just all you can think is they really didn't think much about the Defenders. They just there was no real drive to make this live up to what it should be. Because this could have been as important and as great as Avengers was, but it just was just so slow. Again, it just seems like they had a week to come up with something, and that's it. And there have to be characters that they had access to that they just chose not to use.
Well, you mentioned something earlier about what character you would have brought into this. And I know you're like, I don't want to make it be all about that, but I want to know what character would you have brought in? I want to know.
And this is not a guy that I have a huge connection to. This is really just someone that, reading about the Defenders, I know is a character, Damon Hellstrom, AKA Son of Satan. Now, I think it would have been fabulous to have that guy come in and, either drive the story, and he's the one, because another huge problem of Defenders is the team. As much as I like 3 of the 4 of these characters, and I like them quite a lot, it's not a great team because they're too redundant. You've got 2 punchers, and you've got 2 strong people. Here's another conversation for another time about how Jessica Jones's powers. I'm not really. It's weird how they treat her powers because they seem to be unsure, especially in Defenders. Like, okay, so she's strong, but they don't seem to be clear about how strong. They sort of make it seem more in the Defenders that she's not quite as strong as Cage, but she clearly has been established to be that way. And also they've they don't give her, okay, so she's not as tough as Luke. She's not completely bulletproof, but she's got to be somewhat durable. You can't be strong but have a regular skin and bones because you'd hurt yourself. So yeah, it's like they kind of don't know. And she doesn't even do her leap power and all of this.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
When she's carrying Cindy Moon off the field, I just commented out loud. I was like, "Why is Cindy Moon limping along with her? She's Jessica. She should just pick up Cindy Moon and carry her off."
Right.
That's like, I know it's confusing for you, but she is a super strong woman. Like, let that happen.
Right.
I mean, there's questions about how good of a fighter is she, because it's not like she's a trained fighter. I mean, like Trish even is someone who like really trained in how to be a fighter. Just we don't really have a sense if she's actually trained in it at all. She just knows, or she just like she's strong because she's strong. But yeah, they really could have leaned into her flying a bit more. I know it's expensive, but there's ways they could have handled it through.
Absolutely. I mean,
there's ways they could have handled it.
Yeah. And so you've got two strong people, and you've got two fighters, and that's kind of a problem because it's not enough variation. I think Damon Hellstrom would have been fabulous because he would bring a whole new set of powers to the group, and he would also bring the mystical occult aspect to the Defenders. That really is what the Defenders are all about. So that, I think, is a real huge missed opportunity. Also, and I'm going to leave the readers, I'm not going to explain it to you because I don't want to bore anybody, but if you read up on Damon Hellstrom, there's a huge connection between Damon Hellstrom and Trish. And
there
again,
sure is.
And so, I mean, again, if I can't understand why this conversation didn't happen, and again, this is a character. I can't imagine Kevin Feige would put his foot down and go, "You cannot have Son of Satan. I've got huge plans for him." So it leads me to believe that they just didn't know, and they just didn't really bother to do that work and figure out who's going to make the best show. And that's really a shame. And so, yeah.
Well, people just wanted Iron Fist because of the Luke Cage Iron Fist connection. I mean, that was the interest.
Right.
That's always been anyone's interest in Iron Fist has always just been because he had a series with Luke Cage. I mean, that really has been it.
Right.
And it's funny because in the comics, in the recent series by David F. Walker, and this is consistent with many other characterizations of Iron Fist, though they're not all of them. Iron Fist is just like a fun, like, sweet guy who doesn't quite live up to his potential, but really his heart is in the right place, who's getting his pal into trouble, but is also a helpful influence on Luke because he keeps Luke from completely making himself miserable all the time by being a brooding kind of individual. And that's a personality that they could have really conveyed with this, and they didn't. And there were moments where you sort of see like them trying to do like a younger brother, older brother thing between the two of them. But it doesn't work because the charm isn't there, and they tried to sort of make Finn more of the like the chill zen out guy, but he loses his zen constantly, so it doesn't even work. Right. It doesn't even work. And in their children's stuff, in their kids' cartoons, Iron Fist is on the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon. Like in the kids' cartoons, he's basically, a friend of mine described it, so he's basically like Michelangelo from Ninja Turtles in the kids' cartoon. So they're definitely like, really mushing up how the characterization is being done here. I'm not saying they should have had him saying cowabunga dudes on the show, but it just seems like a personality that they pulled out of nowhere that doesn't really work with anyone else's personality in a compelling way. One thing I wanted to ask you, and I mean, I know like you don't like the show, so the answer is the scene didn't really work, but I do want to hear your thoughts specifically about the scene, and I guess it's episode 2 or so, where Luke Cage asks Danny, have you considered using your privilege to resolve these problems? Because you could try doing that. And I think that like there are some fans who are just really happy that the show, acknowledged that this was a difference between the characters in the first place. But there's other folks who have other opinions about the scene. I don't know. What did you think about it?
Well, it is kind of interesting that the Defenders is slightly a referendum on Iron Fist in that, you have Luke sort of call his privilege out. And I didn't love it, but I also thought, well, they're trying, that's an interesting thing. And of course, that would have to come up. Iron Fist really is the odd man out here. He's the one who's not really a New Yorker. I mean, he was born there, but he isn't a New Yorker the way they are. He isn't connected to New York the way the others are. And he's the rich one. And the others are all decidedly sort of, working class. Even Daredevil being a lawyer, he just still has this working class sort of aspect to his character. So that was cool that they did that. And of course, I know everyone really, we all enjoyed seeing Luke Cage slam Danny Rand to the ground a couple times and have and seeing his punches until he lights up, do nothing to Luke Cage. That was fun, but to a point, I appreciated that. It didn't bother me at all that he would do that. It actually made sense that he would. Luke's kind of interesting in this because he goes from being, he was so cynical in his own series, and of course in Jessica Jones even more so, and now he's made this sort of 180. I'm not really sure, where he's so altruistic. He so wants to, help the community. I'm curious where this goes for season 2 of Luke Cage. I always think of Luke Cage as being sort of, a decent guy, but also someone who's sort of just, relentlessly pragmatic and also, this is a guy who comes up with heroes for hire. So, yeah, he someone who's like, hey, I have to get paid here. So, yeah, they sort of went in a slightly different direction where, I don't know if Heroes for Hire is ever going to come into this to any degree, or if Luke's just going to be a superhero sort of on his own, on his own terms. But, yeah, it was interesting to see him go so altruistic and so much about helping the community. In stark contrast, of course, to his ex, Jessica Jones. And also, can I just say, how do you have Jessica, Claire Temple, and Luke Cage, and you don't have a scene with all three of them together? I just don't understand that. I mean, you don't have the tension, how to deal with that almost at all. I mean, you have these three people, get them in a room, see what happens. Do they fight? Do they have a three-way? What? I mean, they finally sort of touch on it a little bit in the last episode. There's a couple moments where there's the spark between Jessica and Luke is acknowledged, and of course that's going to they'll come back to that. No, I'm sure we all know in the comics that Jessica and Luke are sort of destined to be together. But yeah, it's amazing how little was done with Claire after all this buildup. She's the woman that's really glued this whole thing together, and she has almost nothing to do in this series.
I mean, we on Graphic Policy Radio, we regularly refer to Rosario Dawson as the Queen of Love and Beauty of our hearts, and I thought that her role in this was just really disappointing. They gave her very little to do except for the romance scene with Luke at the beginning of the series. I was really, really happy that she and Luke got to have sex. Yay! I applaud them. I'm happy this happened. That was great. I don't think we necessarily had him have sex with someone who didn't have super strength, so there was a different kind of a sex scene. But that was good, yay. But yeah, Claire just didn't have much to do here. And I also thought that in general, there's a real question of what happens to all these different couples. It just continues to sort of be a little bit left out there in ways that are not I think that most of the writers don't really care about the romantic intrigue that much. And that disappoints me because I really care about the romantic intrigue that much. And I know that they're not going to do much focus on it in the Defenders series, but I felt like whatever was there just wasn't done well by and large. And I continue to maintain, obviously, that the chemistry between Alton Hines and, oh my God, what's her name? The actress who plays Karen Page is far superior than Daredevil Charlie Cox's chemistry with her. And every time they try to make it seem like they were this couple that should almost happen, I'm just a little bit grossed out at this point even. But yeah, it was unclear to me what Finn Jones's relationship with Jessica Henwick was supposed to be. Maybe there was a romantic connection, maybe there wasn't, I don't know. She certainly was really hand-holdy with him in a way that was please just leave him to his own devices. He's not worth it, honey. But in general, I don't know. The romantic intrigue just wasn't well handled enough.
No, not at all. Yeah, and I mean, Colleen also really suffered a lot in this. I mean, really reduced to very little. She does get to participate in the final episode melee, and she and Misty come together, and for their, in a way that sort of hints at their partnership later. But yeah, I think Karen's also a huge problem here. I mean, just I know there's a lot of people that don't care for Karen's character in general. I haven't had a huge problem with her in the other series, but her writing in Defenders is just so poor. Like every scene she's in, there's no scene she's in that you really enjoy, and it's really unfortunate. And yeah, every time you see her, you get trained by Defenders that you almost want to hit the fast forward button every time she happens up on screen. And for all of the side characters who get a lot to do, they all have to do a lot of heavy lifting on their solo shows. And literally in Defenders, they basically are all interacting with each other in a waiting room, and that's it. Just like, oh, so you're Jessica's best friend, more than a best friend, and you know the Daredevil. Wow, I mean, just not interesting. Again, you figure in 8 hours they could give Foggy, Karen, Trish a little something to do. We understand they're not the Defenders, but yeah, just kind of shockingly poor in terms of how the characters are sort of deployed in this show, and just they really didn't have much to do except for sort of remind you that they're there and wait till their solo shows to pick up so they can have an arc again.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good way to put it. And then I think, speaking of things that are to come, many of our listeners are probably aware that I think having a show in which the Punisher is the protagonist is a terrible idea for the future of the world, because all that will come as a result of it will be a lot of right-wing hate memes that will literally arm the alt-right with further cultural ammunition to seduce, young, marginally racist young men towards taking greater racist action and feeling more comfortable and embracing their racism. So that's going to be coming. The thing is, I know that there's lots of people with great politics who really enjoy the Punisher as a character, and I'm really interested in talking with folks whose politics are from the left, or who, people who are doing anti-racist work, who do like the Punisher, to help figure out sort of how can we disarm this ticking time bomb that is this next series. That before it literally hurts people, because it is going to happen no matter what. I don't think that Perlmutter is literally evil, but by and large, most of the people at Marvel aren't sitting there twiddling their thumbs looking forward for a cultural bomb to explode. That's not. They just don't. They don't get it. They don't know how the culture is weaponized in those ways. But I don't know if you had any thoughts about how this sets us up for the Punisher. Or perhaps, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you're one of the lefty folks, anti-racist folks, who's I think the Punisher could work. I think it could be good. Mind you, I'm not against the Punisher being a character at all. I'm against him being a protagonist of a show, because that makes him the hero, no matter what you tell the audience. Or no matter what you tell Karen Page when she becomes a massive hypocrite for siding with him. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I tend to agree, and I have a long relationship with the Punisher. I was sort of, I'm 46, so, that means when he kind of exploded in the mid-'80s, I was there. I was part of that. I had the poster on the wall because, I'm a teenage boy. Of course, it's, Punisher's awesome. But as you grow older, although I really did enjoy Ann Nocenti's run of Daredevil, in which she made Daredevil this, unapologetic lefty. And so when he and the Punisher fought, it was really not just you break the law and I don't. It was really, right wing versus left wing. And then and I told her this on Twitter. I think that really had a big impact on me when I was to read that at 16, 17. That, these superheroes really stood for sort of points of view that were rooted in the real world. And that's part of why they were, destined to clash all the time. And I'm thankfully I missed the Frank Miller Daredevil. That was before I got to the character. So I'm really happy that I got to him when he was this, kick-ass, bleeding heart liberal. But anyhow, so, honestly now, I'm not a huge Punisher fan. I tend to agree that the character, he's a great guy to appear. He's a great guy to show up. I think the season 2 of Daredevil completely collapses when Punisher disappears. That's really the most interesting part, is the interaction, the interplay between the two, and sort of when he's a mysterious figure. I have a lot of misgivings, and obviously we all know that if you see a Punisher sticker on a car, half the time you don't think, oh, there's someone I'd probably I want to talk to and hang out with. You think, oh, this is a right wing guy whose politics probably appall me, and this is the one comic book character whose fandom I'm quite iffy on. This is a very politically charged time to be doing these sort of bloody white male Avengers. I mean, this thing, American Assassin, which I guess is tanking at the box office. I was just saying earlier today to somebody, it's like, this really kind of sickens me, to be honest. And I'm someone who grew up with all that macho stuff in the 80s. But I mean, where we are in the culture now, and mass shootings every week, this sort of glorification of violent retribution is kind of irresponsible. We will see. I mean, it looks like the Punisher is going to get some grand conspiracy that deals with Afghanistan, and I'm sure they're going to try to pull a Captain America with him, where it's like he's not. Yeah, we know he's sort of associated with this sort of right-wing point of view, and they're going to make him more of this sort of like, pit him against someone kind of like Dirty Harry and Magnum Force. They're going to probably pit him against something that's even more right-wing and horrible to sort of make him seem less so. I'll watch it. I do like Bernthal as a Punisher, but I completely understand why you feel the way you do.
Well, that's interesting that you think that they might take it in that direction. I'm really interested in like what do folks think is likely to happen in the series. Just having him go up against like someone who's like, "Hi, I'm a Nazi," in a more clear terms, I think is an interesting possibility. I mean, do we have a sense at all of what plot lines they're considering at this point, or?
We don't. From the little bit of video and things that the very sort of oblique things they've been releasing, you get the sense that this is about some vast military conspiracy that Frank Castle possibly was a part of at one point, and now. So in other words, it's not going to be the Punisher taking on, MS-13, or the Punisher just going out and blowing away scumbags. It ain't going to be that. It will be something where his past as a soldier and the sort of chicanery, there's a scene of him grabbing another soldier and shoving him against the wall. And I have a feeling they're going to sort of go pull a Captain America with him, knowing what he represents might turn out people to sort of paint him in a sort of different way and have him be sort of represent something different from, I'm right, you're wrong, and you die. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Again, so yeah, I share. So I have a very complicated relationship with the Punisher, but I totally get why this is not necessarily good news. And yeah, there's a lot of characters I'd rather see come to Netflix, to Marvel Netflix. I think Moon Knight would be fabulous. I kind of wish they sort of go, for that specific thing where you can be a little more gritty and you can take him into a series like that. That would be really interesting. And my very
complex, mentally ill Jewish superhero who talks to an Egyptian deity, definitely an interesting character.
Yes. You haven't seen that before, have you? Yeah.
No, I have not. I have not.
That's some new stuff, and that would be great. But
actually, I know. I don't think there's nobody Jewish in the MCU, is there?
I believe Tony Stark has made, or no, I think it was Howard Stark, and maybe it was on Agent Carter, has alluded to being possibly Jewish. That the Starks weren't the Starks when they came here. So I think it was that, but no, not really. That in sort of in keeping with the comics, they have been sort of they haven't done a lot of that. And of course, when Bernthal was cast, I was wondering if they would sort of go that way with the Punisher, but no, they made him. They established that he's a Catholic, just like Daredevil is, which I understand. That makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Also, I'm sort of like, no, we don't want him. You can keep him. I would much rather take the mentally ill man with 3 different jobs who's like, I don't know. I'm like, that feels much more relatable. That definitely feels way more relatable to me as a Jewish person than the person who decides that he's white and is in charge of deciding who's guilty and who's innocent.
Right, and I mean, and of course, Magneto is over on Fox, but
exactly.
when they and then they effectively separated Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, which I know some iterations say that they're not the children of Magneto, but in my mind they're always going to be the kids of Magneto, and in my mind, as I watch even Age of Ultron, these are the kids of Magneto, and therefore Jewish, even if they weren't raised knowing that they were. So, but yeah, so that's it, and they're not really. They aren't, Scarlet Witch is not, if she doesn't seem to be aware of her Jewishness or hasn't talked about it if she is.
No, so suddenly I feel very invested in this Moon Knight idea of yours. Hopefully there'll be a Daughters of the Dragon. I mean, I know that we have, that somewhere there is a robot arm making its way to Misty Knight.
They released the first still, and it looks actually kind of like a conventional prosthetic arm. Like it doesn't look, it's not all tricked out. Now that might just be an early thing, and they may freak it in post-production. So I don't know how far they're going to go with her having, if it like being bionic and her being able to, knock down doors or what have you. But the arm is in place. The prosthetic arm is coming. I'm guessing it's going to be Rand Enterprises, which I don't even remember what Rand Enterprises does. I watched the Iron Fist all episodes. I don't even remember what his company. I don't even remember what his company does.
They're
it looks
business
like he's gonna
people. Yes. Oh my God, Vincent Adult Man. Vincent Adult Man. Now, do you watch BoJack? You watch BoJack, right?
I do not watch BoJack.
Oh my God, but you live in Hollywood. Okay, well. You should watch BoJack Horseman, but for our listeners who do, I won't spoil it. I feel like there's a real connection between Danny Rand and Vincent Adult Man, as both of the characters are constructed in the shows, and I'll leave it at that so as not to spoil you.
Okay.
But yeah, so he does various business type things.
Okay, yeah, exactly. It just feels so generic. I think there's a huge fan. Hunger for Daughters of the Dragon. And frankly, if I were, Jeff Loeb or whomever, I would deep six Defenders for quite a while, and the next big one would be Daughters of the Dragon, because clearly that's where the interest is, to see, Colleen, Misty, possibly Trish, and Claire in there somehow to get doing their own mystery, their own adventure. Yeah, that would be good, and it could happen. I think that we'll see if they're smart, they'll listen and they'll go that way. But yeah, it's unclear. And then of course there's this whole drama going with Disney threatening to start their own streaming service. So I don't think that the Netflix shows, that the Netflix Marvel shows will be in any way. I can't imagine them getting yanked to a Disney service, because these are R-rated shows for all intents and purposes, and so I can't imagine that Disney would want them on their streaming service. But that's another bit of drama that in the future as far as Netflix is concerned. But there's been no real word. They did announce that they are going to do a second season of Iron Fist as well. And I swear, when I watched the Comic-Con footage, the panel, I swear I heard basically a polite smattering of applause for when they announced that Iron Fist will get a second season. It was not at all lusty or yes. It was just kind of, oh, sure, we'll clap for that. But so apparently they're going to do Iron Fist season 2. And again, do we really need Iron Fist season 2? Just put the guy in Luke Cage season 2 and, call it a day. Do we really? But yeah, apparently so. There is some setup, I think, without, slight spoiler, there is definitely some setup that the Iron Fist is going to sort of position himself as the new Daredevil, because Daredevil's situation is kind of unclear at the end of Defenders, and there is some indication that Iron Fist is going to try to become the new sort of Daredevil of Hell's Kitchen, or be the defender that of the streets of New York require.
And that's a comic story, right? That was Bendis.
Right.
Bendis had like the whole, which I really enjoyed and liked, but that was back when Bendis was doing really good shit consistently, and that also was an Iron Fist who wasn't this Iron Fist. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe if Iron Fist tries to act more like Charlie Cox, he will be less irritating.
Or maybe if he trained like Charlie Cox, because Charlie Cox looks like he actually trains to fight. And again, how can the fight scenes be so good for Daredevil? Even season 2 has some really good fight scenes, and the fight scenes for Defenders are just dreck. They're just the worst. I mean, there's one scene in the Chinese restaurant where I'm literally just watching a bunch of people, like, I'm just watching fists and elbows, and it's just like, there's no poetry, there's no choreography. It's just like, this isn't interesting. And, and to never have a scene where the lights go out and Daredevil is calling out punches for the other guys, come on.
Yeah.
How do you not do it?
How can you? Also, speaking of staging, I was really, I get the whole scarf over the head thing, but it looked so dumb. I felt like there had to be a different way to visually cover his face without it looking so dumb. Like, even a different kind of scarf would have been more effective. I don't know. I mean, what did you have thoughts about how they did that from a visual standpoint?
Yeah, it looked dumb. You'd think a guy like him would carry something just in case in his back pocket for that kind of eventuality. But also, I'm not really clear if it would have really, I think you could have gotten away with him just fighting, without that. I mean, I understand at that point the character thinks I've got to identity protect. Jessica Jones can be Jessica Jones and Luke Cage is Luke Cage, but I'm the one who puts on a costume. But, it's not, I think you could have just had him wander into this fight and he's having it and he doesn't have time to do that, rather than, Jessica already knows who he is. So it just seemed a little unnecessary. If you know where the plot's going and you're the writer, you can just sort of not have to make that kind of decision where you have to and put Charlie Cox in a sweater over his face, the top half of his face. But there's just a lot of decisions in this that seemed very poorly thought out and not really it just didn't need to happen that way. So yeah, but pretty much that. Yeah. So.
Well, thank you again. I think we're probably a good time for us to wrap.
Yes.
I'll just remind our listeners again that where they can follow you on the internet.
Yeah, you can come to geniusbastard.com is my personal website. Sepulveda the movie is the site for my film. You can also go to vimeo.com/on-demand/Sepulveda. The film's available. This is my second feature, co-directed with my wife, Jenna English. You can. It's available for rent or purchase. You watch the trailer and check it out. And I am on Twitter, tweeting constantly as Genius Bastard about all these things. And if you really want to know more about my ideas for how the Defenders could have been awesome, I'd be happy to tell you. But I'll leave it at that.
Oh, we appreciate that. And for our listeners, the long-lost Brett will return to us. The prodigal co-host will be joining me on Monday for a very special episode. That'll be the Graphic Policy Reunion show, in which Brett and I will update you about all the crazy shit that's gone down in the comics world since we've last discussed external news of things happening in the comics world. What did we learn at San Diego Comic-Con? What did we learn at FlameCon? What's coming up in the new year? Oh my God, Ta-Nehisi Coates is writing Captain America. Will the world be a better place finally? Who can say? Join us on Monday to find out more. So looking forward to that. And for anyone who'd listened to the episode late, you can actually listen to us by downloading us now on iTunes. We'll be up on iTunes in about an hour or two. You'll also be able to download us on SoundCloud and Stitcher in a couple hours. And there will be an archive of this up online in a couple hours as well. So remember, we're Graphic Policy. You can always read our great stories, including pieces like the one by David at graphicpolicy.com and on Twitter at Graphic Policy. And I myself, Ilana Levin, I'm on Twitter all the goddamn time at ELANA_Brooklyn. And from now till next week, keep it geeky.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.